Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this in-depth ag forecast for Australia. I'd like to preface what I'm going to share with you today by just letting you know that some of the signals as we get out there into the month of February and beyond are a bit muddled right now. Some of the clarity we've seen recently getting into the summer has kind of washed away, and I want to explain to you what's going on there, why there's some inconsistencies, and just to be very transparent, this is kind of a time period of maybe lower predictability. But I'm going to show you what we do know, look at some analogs, and try to take us out through the next 9 months. I'm going to walk you through that, okay? But I want to first start you with where we've been. The first set of maps that we're looking at here are looking at some recent drought episodes. And if I take you back over the last month or so, we can see that throughout the end of December, getting into January, we built in some very dry conditions here that helped to push farther into New South Wales, southern Queensland, and Victoria as we got into the month of January. And that's what helped spurt along the bushfires that we saw down here. This is what helped with the heat wave that went through. And meanwhile, parts of the north have been extremely wet in Queensland, primarily driven by the tropical system that went into that back in earlier parts of January. You see, we start here because I'm trying to assess going forward if there is already kind of preceding drought and heat issues versus flooding issues, just thinking through how the whole pattern is going to shape up for the next month. Because I was looking this morning, and I want to show you again, I went into all of Australia, and what I pulled out here was I masked it for cropland only. And I wanted to see for the crop area right now, how healthy does just vegetation look? Now, I understand it's summer. You are a winter crop peaking in terms of your NDVI. We're here. But I put on here every year going back to 2020. And what was interesting was that if you look right now at 2026, this is the lowest NDVI value we've seen through this point in the year, going back at least 5 or 6 years. And why I want to stress that is because the heat waves that have come through and the range of precipitation totals is really starting to drive some huge disparities, and we're curious if they're going to carry forward in the forecast. I'm talking about this. Now, when I talked to you a couple of weeks ago, we were pretty set on knowing that flooding was going to come into this area. We were also concerned with the whole East Coast and through this region seeing the risk of flooding as well, with much drier implications farther into the interior. I will mention, though, that some of our models took that tropical system, the one that soaked this part of Queensland, and we thought it would carry across much of the rest of the northern part of Australia, but it didn't. So as I look at all of this, what I really see is just high disparity in the precipitation. And as we look forward in this forecast, the question is, when do we start to fill in some of these gaps into this area? What was amazing was to watch the fires that we saw on satellite before, but the fires that lined this area on strong winds, very dry conditions coming through this section or out of South Australia into New South Wales, Victoria. And while there was flooding right next to it because of the flow coming through part of the Tasman Sea in this direction. And it's been a story of differences overall in this new year. I want to show you what's driving this. I went back and looked at the wind pattern and the low levels of the atmosphere since the start of the new year, and then compared it to historical averages. And what's interesting has been the anomalous flow in this direction since we've started this new year. And that's what's driven more moisture into this part of Australia, both New South Wales and Victoria, and it's left the rain shadow effect on the interior. Now, thinking that through to the north, we watch these winds push in a tropical system into this region, but I'm most curious going forward in this forecast with what's happening right here. Now, the winds that we're seeing moving through Indonesia, eventually out into the open Pacific, are from the west. And remember, this is our trade wind region. We call these westerly wind bursts, and this right here, this area, is giving us the very first hints at how quickly this La Niña is going to die and go into El Niño state. And we do predict that. We do not predict this particular La Niña fading to neutral and staying there. We expect by the end of your summer and the start of your autumn, we will be talking about a rapid transition to El Niño. The question is how strong and what year does it resemble? And those are some questions I'm going to try to answer in this forecast video. What is also interesting is this. Since the start of the new year, almost all of Australia has recorded lower than average pressure. The low pressure we've seen here is from the tropical system that came through, but the low pressure that we're monitoring throughout the rest of Australia has primarily been due to heat. Remember, hotter air is less dense, and as you get into the heart of summer, even with the buildup of clear skies and light winds, which we typically associate with high pressure, it was still lower than the historical averages. And that's what that heat wave did, drop these pressures off significantly. Now, with the heat wave that came through, I would like to show you what it looks like from the start of the year till now compared to average. And we did see numerous rounds of excessive heat move through this region. And I've got another one coming right here. It's going to get very hot again in parts of South Australia, southern Queensland, New South Wales, and Victoria in the very near-term future. But thankfully, this heat wave was kind of pushed back by some stronger southerly winds that brought in some cooler conditions into this region after enduring some exceptionally hot air. Now, speaking of exceptionally hot air, I do want to point out a couple of things across the northern hemisphere. A lot of Europe has gone over very cold, and this would have put a huge spike in the natural gas demand if the United States would have done the same thing. But it's not been that way. Europe's been cold. The U.S. has been very, very mild so far this winter for us. And where it's been most mild has been on our hard-red winter wheat belt, which right now is having one of its most warm, the warmest in 134 years on record in this area. And I'm bringing this up because our winter crops grown right here are about to meet a serious blast of Arctic air in the next 10 to 15 days. And I'm going to finish this forecast video telling you about it because it could be substantial for the U.S. and it could be substantial for things happening around the world. All right, with all that being said, I did go in and check on some satellite data across Australia here on the 21st. I did notice some nice convection happening in Queensland, a couple of pop-up storms in this area that we saw throughout the day. But I really wanted just to look at the latest data to tell if we had any sort of leftover wildfire smoke from the bushfires we saw earlier in the month. And I'm glad to say that we don't. That does not mean the risk is not coming back into this area. It will be, okay? But I just want to show you that right now we don't see that smoke, which is good. All right, on a grand scale of things, this animation is probably the most important to me right now. And what I'm watching most carefully is right here. Now that feature, which I just highlighted, seems like minuscule, right, compared to the rest of the world. But you have to remember, this is a map projection. It dramatically distorts the size of our geographic features the farther north or south you go from the equator. This is actually a huge event. And this is what we call a westerly wind burst. And that is the first of what will likely be many over the coming weeks and months, driving the warm water that is piled up in the West Pacific back over here to this side, the East Pacific, in the next 6 to 9 months. The trade winds, which for months have been just screaming across like this, right? We've talked about that ad nauseum, okay? They're now slowing down and making a hard turn. That is also an indication that La Niña is out the door and El Niño is starting to come back into play. And right now, a couple of these westerly wind bursts are kind of curling up into one tropical system here. You're going to see another one right in through there. And these tropical systems are going to be key to understanding our precipitation pattern over the next couple of weeks. Let me close that, sorry. Take a look at this. This is an animation showing you over the next 10 days where there's going to be some tropical low-pressure development. And as you watch this going forward, you can see that we're going to be watching here and here. Now, the first system is going to come through like this, and we're going to take a look at the total precipitation. This one's going to be a bit later and a bit stronger as it comes into Queensland, but it could also spread quite a bit of precipitation into the interior of Australia. The question is, does any of this moisture get into some of these extremely dry areas? So to get an answer to that, I want to show you two maps. They look at the next 2 weeks. The first one is from the European model, and I want to notice these two tropical systems and their influence on the precipitation pattern. Because throughout much of the east, including most of Queensland, most of New South Wales, Victoria, and Tasmania, we're looking at a very, very dry pattern for the next couple of weeks. Western Australia, we could catch the relief of a couple of fronts that hit right in through here, but much of the interior is dry until you get right there, which would be the edge of the moisture from this tropical system. Now, this is the European model solution. We have another model we can look at, and that is the GFS. Now, the GFS is not so keen on the development of this second system, and that's why it's so much drier into this whole region. So the next 2 weeks must be watched very, very carefully. Now, let's get into some details. I'm going to go back to the European model solution on this and show you kind of this new mapping system I've been working on. Now, we will release this to you. It's just not ready yet. I'm still building it. But now looking at the 12Z GFS model, European model, starting on Thursday the 22nd, here's the pattern we're seeing evolve in every 6 hours in the precipitation. And there's your two tropical events. See them? Now remember, the European has this, the GFS doesn't. I just walked you through the end of the week all the way to Sunday. And as we play into Monday and Tuesday, it will be the advection or the movement of the moisture with this tropical system into more of Western Australia that we're going to watch carefully. Now that system, as it gets farther and farther to the south, knocks on the door here of South Australia. But during that time period, the European model strengthens this second tropical event and tries to bring it here into the northern part of Queensland and eventually to North Australia. Now, as I watch this going out all the way to next Friday, we're already out almost 10 days in the forecast. There's one thing I do want you all to be watching with me. I have very little confidence in this, but here's what I want you to see. Going out 10 days, 11 days, this is Sunday, February 1st, into the 2nd and the 3rd, we start to see the models increasing the chances of getting precipitation through here. Now, it's only coming in the European model, and therefore we have to take this with a pretty big grain of salt. Because if I just show you the total amount of precipitation being added up, you're going to see here over the next 10 days that most of Queensland, most of South Australia, most of New South Wales and Victoria, and almost the entirety of the western half of Western Australia is dry. I mean, that's a 7-day forecast on total precipitation. Very, very heavy in through here, but almost nothing except for some scattered storms in this area. Outside of the next tropical event, which could be taking shape here and influencing parts of northern Queensland, there's not a whole lot of precipitation in this pattern. But if I keep going through this, watch. We get out there, February 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and there just starts to be this increase of precipitation in this area. I'm not bought into it. I'm just letting you know that some of the models are showing that. Let's now take a look at, how about winds next? Let's go to wind gusts, because I'm just curious how strong some of the winds are going to be out of these tropical systems. And as we just play it forward here, I'm not looking at anything too violent. Now I'm showing you winds in miles per hour, but let's just go out 10 days and see what these maximum accumulated gusts are. You can see that we're looking at, anywhere between 50 and 80 kph. And in this system, should it form, we're looking at wind speeds that could get up 180 kph. That's approaching 100 miles an hour, 115 miles an hour. But outside of that, not a whole lot in terms of widespread wind issues that we have to be concerned about. What I do want you to be watching very carefully are the temperatures. And so I'm going to show you temperature anomalies. These are differences from normal. And we're starting this off early here on Thursday morning. So we're quite cool, except for in Western Australia, which is very warm. But playing forward, watch the heat build in Western Australia, South Australia, and move its way toward, New South Wales, southern Queensland, and all the way down to Victoria. Going into this weekend and beyond, we see repeated days of excessive heat. And just stopping this on Tuesday afternoon next week, we can see here that these temperatures might be, in some places, 15 to 17 degrees Celsius above average. It's cool here because of the cloud cover and rainfall from the tropical event. It's cool here because of a front that's coming through. But a lot of sustained heat coming into this area, and we can stretch this out even farther, quite a bit farther, and we're still going to continue to see that risk in this area. So please be aware of the heat coming back on and the risk it poses with drought intensification and the risk it poses with the bushfires. Okay? Now, let's stretch this out and think a little bit more longer term. I'm going to come back to this map in a second. I want to check one thing real quick. I want to go to the European model, the 12Z run, and I just want to see total precipitation from the ensemble. Because through the next 10 days, man, that is a massive donut of drier weather. But I'm curious, again, as we start February, does the ensemble fill it in? And as we see here, February 1, 2, 3, it tries to bring in some better moisture into that area. So I just wanted to have a look just to see if we're getting some support from multiple models. But let's go back to this more extended look. I'm going to show you a 30-day outlook from the GFS. Now, we use two different models when predicting our sub-seasonal time frame. So this is about a month out. So from, let's actually take it out a little farther. Let's go all the way out from the 24th of January to the 24th of February. Now, as I look at it, the GFS is very dry here. It's drier farther to the south. And the only place it's wetter is probably just capturing the tail end of the two tropical events that are coming in at the very end of this month, and that's why it's still showing up wetter here. What I note in this is that the GFS is planting the MJO, which is our biggest thunderstorms in the tropics, somewhere here in phase 7 or phase 8. And I'm telling you that because if I show you what's going on with the European model, notice how much wetter it is. It's got a wet streak in through here. It's got near normal precipitation to the south and very wet in the whole western half of Australia. You don't see that big blob of wet because it's off the screen. You see, the European model is taking the MJO, shoving it out of phase 7 into phase 8, and then ripping it across the Pacific Ocean and restarting it back into the the Indian Ocean. And that movement is going to be key. Now, you just saw two different models giving you two entirely different forecasts, hence my reluctance here in saying that anything is nailed down. You want to know what BOM is showing? Their forecast right now for the month of February, when looking at the chance of exceeding median rainfall, is almost just hovering most of the country near average. Now, don't think that that means, oh, I should expect average February weather. No. What this is showing us is that there's so much spread, it's hard to get on either side of average. So this is actually BOM's way of saying, hey, there's too much uncertainty for us to make a forecast leaning one direction or the other. And I think I know why this is the case. I want to show you BOM's forecast of the MJO. It's currently in phase 6. It's going to flip over to phase 7. It's going to rip through phase 8 and then very weakly come through phases 1 and 2. Now let me tell you why this is important, that it comes in these weaker phases of 1 and 2, or weaker amplitude of 1 and 2. Because if it came way out into 1, 2, and 3, we'd have an entirely different scenario. And you know why. Look at the averages. You see, if you watch what happens as you go from phase 1 into phase 2 and phase 3, what happens? You bring in more moisture that spreads its way across the country, especially as you get into phase 4. So our favorites for bringing in summer precipitation is when the MJO sweeps through here and ends up over the maritime continent. That's you. You're the maritime continent, all right? If it stays over in the western Pacific, that's no good. Now let me show you something. BOM's forecast doesn't bring it sweeping through, but the European model does. You see, as you go from day 15 to day 20 and beyond, it's trying to take more of its forecast through phase 1, phase 2, and into phase 3, and maybe phase 4. And I'm just telling you all of that because I want to explain why the European model, with the reset of the MJO, is trying to bring in more precipitation. It's at least being consistent with itself. But I'm telling you, don't trust it. Don't trust the GFS. Don't trust BOM right now. None of us have a clue as to where this is going. We are all anxiously watching the way that this westerly wind burst evolves. Now, this is how we look at it. These colors indicate stronger winds right here. See it? That's the geography. Stronger wind bursts out of the west. And by the time we start February, we see La Niña kind of kicking and screaming and trying to make a little bit of a return. And these are easterly winds coming back. Now, as that occurs, we will reposition the MJO back over here, phase 1, 2, and 3. And that's where we're starting to see the European model giving us this hint at early February wetter conditions that may last through more of February. But that's a pretty weak thread to kind of tread on here and to use as an anchor to figure out where this is going to go. So let's be careful with this forecast going forward. What I do know is that the westerly winds that have shown up lately have done a number on this La Niña. For weeks and months, we've been pushing colder water here, piling up a lot of warm water in the western Pacific warm pool, and now that's coming back. And this is eroding. We've already seen over in Niño region 1+2, which is right over here, we've already seen warm water upwelling. We talked about it 2 weeks ago. It's still there. And what we're anticipating is that this El Niño is going to crash, this La Niña is going to crash into El Niño. Now, I want to remind you of something. All that an El Niño does as you go into autumn and eventually into winter is it kind of tilts the odds in the favor of having drier conditions showing up here. It's not a slam dunk guarantee. It just kind of tilts the odds in that direction. So what I want to do is take another look at the progression of this. So let's start in January. We already know that the ocean temperatures look like this, but watch this. Going into February, March, and April, we're already seeing that warm water slosh back and the beginning of this El Niño. April is going to be your key month. I have a feeling that over the next, I'm not joking, the next 3 solid months, you are not going to hear a lot of confidence from me as we transition toward autumn. I'm not going to be confident in my forecasts because by April, I want to know if we're consistently getting westerly wind bursts and the water temperatures rise here, because by April, we think that the ocean temperatures may be a full 0.5 degree Celsius above normal, and that's going to trigger, going into May, June, and July, a full-on El Niño event. Now, the models are doing this with it, and you know, I showed this to you 2 weeks ago. the seasonal forecast for precipitation from the European model. This is February, March, April, May, April, May, June, July. What did you see? There was a pretty consistent dry signal here. But that is just the European model being consistent with itself. I've looked at other forecast models. Like, I'd like to take you over to the new one you haven't seen yet, which is from the IRI multi-model probability forecast system. Long story short, this is a statistical approach to predicting the upcoming forecast weather based on those dynamical models. So let's just go in and have a closer look at Australia here. In fact, let me reset this site. There we go. Now we're going to Australia, and I want you to see its forecast. That's February, March. And just so you know, these are the drier colors. These are the wetter. February, March, April. Remember, this model was initialized with wetter than average conditions here. What about as we go from there into March, April, May? Now we're working into autumn. Do you see how it's lost this signal? It's just not there. You then go beyond that into April, May, June, when we should start to expect more of a drier signal showing up here, and it's also not there. But the only consistently dry picture we've got is through Indonesia. And all the way out to May, June, July, I mean, I still look at this and say, all right, I get into winter and see the drier signal here, but it's not as though it's expansive. It's not as though we're seeing these colors all throughout this, this region. The only dry signal we've got right now is here. So I'm sorry, folks, but I'm not going to be able to tell you anything with confidence until we probably get to April and see how we get out of summer and into autumn. And that's going to dictate how our wintertime precipitation is going to evolve. All right, that's not exactly the news you want to hear, but I can at least do this for you. I went out and reconstructed, and I showed you these last time, but I reconstructed the best analog years that I could find that were years where there was a La Niña in summer that by autumn into winter was transitioned fully into El Nino. That's the years that's happened. Now look at these years. Many of you remember these years very, very well. And you're going to go, wait a minute. Well, 2009 wasn't like 2014, and neither was 2002. There's a lot of mix in this. What I see, though, for February to April is wetter conditions historically here, a little drier into the interior of Western Australia, and a drier signal New South Wales and Victoria. But it's not bone dry. It's just right here on the color scale. I also see drier into southern Brazil and Argentina. Got to talk about that in a few moments. Well, that's February to April. Remember, I'm not going to have a solid signal, I think, until April. And the thing I'm going to be watching out for is this. Most of Indonesia is forecast to be dry going into autumn. And we're starting to see drier signals showing up here, which is traditionally what happens when an El Nino develops. We then go out beyond that and say, what about June to August for those years? And again, this dry signal for much of Indonesia is stark. I mean, it's very, very prevalent in every forecast model. And so is kind of Eastern Australia's drier risks. But just to point this out again, we're not talking about super dry winter conditions. Speaking of summer, though, the U.S. Cotton Belt is drier. Speaking of summer, the Indian monsoon is typically weaker. And Indonesia is drier. We cannot ignore those global signals because they're going to be a part of the larger ag complex that weather could have an influence over. So let's be paying close attention to this going forward. So I want to finish up this forecast video by looking at this. What we've got taking shape over the next 10 days, are two massive Arctic outbreaks across Canada and much of the eastern two-thirds of the United States, Scandinavia, Western Russia, the rest of Russia, and that's a lot of northern hemisphere that's going to be experiencing some brutally cold temperatures. Now, where I live, I kind of wish you were here to witness this. We have got this as our severe weather forecast map over the next 24 to 48 hours. We have all of this color shading here representing extreme cold watch and extreme cold warning. Now, I need to tell you something. This is the northern part of the United States. These people understand cold. So for us to tell them that it's extremely cold, we're looking at overnight low temperatures of minus 20 to minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And brutally, brutally cold air. And then it's going to run farther to the south and across our cotton belt, our winter wheat belt, getting into our mid-south and ripping all the way over to our nation's capital here in Washington, D.C., is a massive winter storm that's taking shape. And it's going to be massive. I mean, this is what we're watching. Let me kind of zoom in here and show this thing to you because it's impressive. As we go forward into this upcoming weekend, look at this. Coming out of Texas, the southern plains. All of this is an ice storm. All of this is very heavy snow, and to the south of it, very heavy rain. And it just rips across the country. Now, agriculturally, we need the water here, but we don't want it coming in looking like this in terms of snowfall. You ready for this? This is nuts. Total snowfall out of this system. We're talking about feet of snow in through this corridor. And the ice is going to be even worse. Look at this. We're about to hit some of our largest airports in the world, like Dallas or Atlanta, with an ice storm. This is going to disrupt global traffic, air traffic. How much? Like 1 inch to 2 inches of ice. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. Just something to think about. I don't trade grain, but I do trade weather events. And I went out and bought stock in a Wisconsin-based company making generators. And I'll just tell you something. When I bought the stock on Friday, I'm already up 10% on it. We always do this. Ahead of these first major ice storms and winter storms, generator sales in the United States just skyrocket. And the reason for that is behind all of this ice, which is going to knock out power, is this. Now, this is what I wish you were here to witness with me. If you've never been in real cold, watch this. Now, I live right there. It's a pleasant day today. We're 13 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. But as time goes on into this weekend, air from the Arctic is spilling into the central United States. We're expecting it to be 20 to 40 degrees colder than average, which for us puts our low temperatures down below 0 degrees Fahrenheit and very, very cold on northern plains. We are doing spring calving up here in parts of Montana and the Dakotas. So there's going to be some brand new cows being born into minus 30 to minus 40 wind chills. Texas is going to go down there with temperatures all the way down to the lower teens, and that's in Fahrenheit, so that's negative Celsius. And we're worried about a major problem here with bursting water pipes and things like that. And it's just two massive waves of Arctic air just racing through the country. And it's going to send our power bills through the roof. It's going to increase heating demand. It's going to be a major, major event, plus the massive disruption to travel. I just wanted to show you that so you know what we're enduring up here. I wish you could come up and see it. It is something to behold. All right, from there, I do want to show you global precipitation as I wrap this up finally. I want you to take note of just two things. We've already talked about Australia, but the second big thing we have to look at is this arc of very wet conditions right in through here. You see, right now we're trying to actively harvest a first crop of soybeans. We're about 7% done on the harvest in the biggest producing state, which is Mato Grosso. But the newest forecasts have brought in very dry conditions into parts of southern Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, and northern Argentina. And Argentina just lowered its estimates on its crops because of some spring weather problems. And now we're looking at this drought issue that's starting to settle into that area. This could be something that would be, I think, quite important when you look at just the global grains, the market positions going forward. And I just wanted you to be aware of it. All right, that's all I got for you tonight. I look forward to monitoring this situation over the next couple of weeks. I'll give you the full details in 2 weeks from now as we get into February. We'll get an update on some of these models and maybe a little bit better handle, on where this pattern's taken us in February, March, and April. Take care. Talk to you soon. Thanks.